Hello guys, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brandon Lyons, and on behalf of the student body, faculty, and administration of Hoboken High School, we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today for our lunchbox lecture on the African American experience in the United States as we celebrate Black History Month. Today's presentation will focus on the history, struggle, and quest of freedom for the African Americans who escaped from bondage of slavery in pursuits of freedom. We are calling this segment Up You Mighty Race, From Slavery to Freedom. Please keep in mind that music and religion played an integral part in empowering the African spirit to break free from both physical and psychological torment of slavery, which lasted in America for over 246 years. This shameful chapter in American history will be chronicled and expressed in various forms, such as literature and plays. At this time, I would like you all to put your hands together for Mr. George Cameron Grant.
Thanks so much. Why am I here? Anybody know who Rose Fortune is, by the way, except those who did it last year?
My students should know.
Rose Fortune, yeah. Any questions?
Raise your hand, Manny.
She was a black loyalist, and she moved to this little town where she did a company of with the wheelbarrow, and she brought people's luggage from the docks to where they wanted to go.
Who's Rose Fortune? And he goes through, I'd say maybe a 3-minute description of this very interesting eccentric woman who would dress in men's clothing and would take a wheelbarrow and go up and down St. George Street from the inns and local homes and would pick up bags at the waterfront and take them to these places. And she used to sort of guard the pier. She was sort of known as she's now referred to as the first policewoman in North America. And I had never heard of this person, but a strange thing happened. So the tour is over, and I'm walking across St. George Street, and I have this realization. My vacation is over. My 3-minute vacation is no longer a vacation, but it's a mission. I have a mission. 1, to find out who this woman is. And 2, why was her grave unmarked? Why was this black woman's grave unmarked? I went back to New York. I started doing a little research, a lot of research, and came up with very, very, very little. And then I finally had a wonderful connection that I made. It was the great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Rose Fortune, who used to be the mayor of Annapolis Royal by the name of Dr. Doreen Lewis. I got in touch with her, and it was amazing. She got on the phone, I told her who I was, and my intent to write a play about Rose Fortune. She was very, very excited. No more than I, because I figured I hit the jackpot. I said, Dr. Lewis, could you please give me everything you have on Rose Fortune? She says, I don't have anything. I've tried to do this myself, and there's so little on her out there. I began to sort of, every writer has a different technique. My technique is I walk around. I'm going to the supermarket, I'm squeezing oranges, I'm writing, I'm thinking, I'm creating. I digest the information, and then I walk around with it. 1, 2 months goes by, 3 months go by. And one night, I wake up like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it's as if I am dragged to the computer. That's it. The play was done in a week. So now, and it literally felt like I was sort of a stenographer. I wasn't really writing a play, I was taking down notes. So this play is now done. What do you do next when you write a play? Oh, Florence. What do you do when you write a play? You have to hear it. You have to get in front of other people and you have to hear it. So I decided to do a cold reading. So here I was. I reached out to, I would say, 15 black actors. And now I'm walking into this studio with a pile of scripts about got a young black slave girl. And I'm feeling, is this going to make any sense to anybody? Is it really going to register? Is it really going to be genuine? Or am I just, spinning my wheels? And I was truly, probably one of the most terrified emotions I ever had in my life, walking into that room and handing out those scripts. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had people in there who had relatives, who had ancestors who were slaves. What was going to happen? So we started reading the script. 10 minutes into reading the script, I heard the first sniffle. I felt the tears coming. By the end of that reading, everybody was in tears, and everybody was hugging and embracing. And I had two folks come up to me, two ladies who played, one who played little young Rose and who played older Rose, who said, "We have passports, we will go anywhere to do this show. My ancestors were slaves, and this is real." And I have to tell you right now, there was no reason for me to be able to write this. None, zero, none. It was channeled. I feel that with all my heart. I didn't know why, it didn't matter. But from that point, we did the show. We decided to do the show at a festival in New York, in Manhattan.
Hi guys, you know me. My name is Amira, and yeah. So, see, this ain't just any old wheelbarrow. Have you know you'd be looking at the Rose Fortune Carton Company of Annapolis Royal, Nova Scotia, established month of April, year our Lord 1784. That's right. Been lugging this heap of timber around since I'm 10 years old, and this is the very same wheelbarrow I've been doing it with. Why? Well, that's a mighty long story, going back even longer than I do. And I confess for my maker to polishing up some of the finer details over the 80 years I've been telling it. But it pretty much started during the troubles when the colonies down below. See, my family, Daddy, Mama, and me, we was owned by the Devons in Philadelphia. There was a proper enough God-fearing family, well-respected amongst their neighbors, who treated us decent like as I reflect on it. Though I'd be lying for God Almighty if I didn't recount the occasional whooping he lay upon my daddy. Those are few and far between, and a whole lot less than the others we heard about or even seen for ourselves. So there will be no grievance coming from this corner of God's earth. Well, Mr. Devon got himself deeply involved in that Tea Party business, and all of a sudden there's lots of official-looking people going in and out of his parlor that day and night, doing and plotting Lord knows what. All I know is one morning we was told to pack our things, and just like that, we was carted out to Virginia, pigs and chickens to boot. I was just turning 9 and the war was just turning against King George, so no sooner did we settle into our new situation did Daddy hear about the governor of Virginia's proclamation.
I believe his name was Dunmore. Yes, that's right. Lord Dunmore. Oh, sweet Jesus, the things I started to forget. Anyhow, this proclamation said that any slaves making their way behind British lines, willing to declare loyalty by picking up a musket in King George's name against the rebel army, well, they'd be set free and clear, along with their kin. And what I shall never forget, till the day I, knocking on the gates of heaven, was being woke from a deep sleep in the middle of that chilly September night. Daddy was looking down at me with eyes wide I'd ever seen. Mom at his side, her eyes just about swollen shut, like she'd been crying forever.
Come on, get yourself up. Come on, sugar. Come on, get up, girl.
What's wrong, Daddy? It's still dark outside.
Hush up, girl.
Why you waking me and Molly up so early?
I need you to wake yourself up and be like the dead doing it.
Why?
Just get up and put one or two things together before we leave.
Leave? Where we going to, Daddy?
Just do as I say and do it quick, girl.
But why can't y'all tell me where we going?
Because I don't know where we're going yet. All I know is we leaving here right now, right this second. Now get yourself up.
But I don't want to leave, Daddy.
You just get yourself up and do what your daddy tells you, young lady, for I give you the back of my hand.
Now, I ain't never heard my mama talk like that. And I knew by the grit of her teeth and the spread of her nostrils, the sweat on her brow, the tears rolling down her face, and hand held high above her head, my next move better be getting up from that floor and packing my things, or there'd be hell to pay for sure.
Yes,
now
ma'am.
get.
And get we did, skipping away into the darkest night I ever did see. Seemed like we was walking blind for hours and hours, when suddenly we came upon a campsite of His Majesty King George's finest, all yawning and yammering away, and they finished suiting up in their fancy black hats, red coats with gleaming gold buttons, chalk white pants, and shiny black boots. Curious thing was, they wasn't all white faces, because huddled around a burning fire and rubbing the morning chill from their hands was some of the prettiest soldiers you ever did see. Blacker than mine. Faces blacker than mine. And to where my daddy hid and presented himself. They chatted a spell, then led him inside the tent, while Mama and I set ourselves by the fire.
In the interim, I get an email from a lady named Catherine Tirio. She is one of the leaders of the Black Loyalist community in Inglewood, which is right outside of Annapolis Royal. Unfortunately, there is such a thing as Annapolis Royal, and then there's sort of a black community right outside of it. And these folks have never really felt like they belong to Annapolis Royal. She gives me an email. She says, I heard that they just purchased a new ferry, and they want to find a name for the ferry. I said, let's do it. So we got together a whole bunch of folks up there, and we got a campaign going. We got a lot of names, and we sent them off to the government. Lo and behold, 3 months later we got the notice. They were calling the new ferry the Fundy Rose. Now, Fundy is the Bay of Fundy, which is a big body of water up there. So they decided to call it Fundy, but Rose after Rose Fortune. And one of the most unforgettable days I ever had was taking a maiden voyage of the Fundy Rose with other relatives of Rose Fortune. Now, what's the point of this? The point of this is this. When you see something that's wrong, it's your obligation to try to fix it. It's your obligation. It's nothing to do with race, nothing to do with gender. There are rights and there are wrongs, and that was a wrong. So now we have the play. The play is done. Now we have the ferry, which came out of nowhere. Next thing, I decided, well, I got to take this to Canada. So we go up to Nova Scotia, and we put together a bunch of people, did a stage reading, very much like you did here. Very much like what you did. Stage reading of Fortune. It was packed. It was absolutely packed. And you know what the most amazing thing was? Annapolis Royal, right? I told you. The first 4 rows were filled with people from Inglewood. Nobody asked if they were coming, but nobody was going to stop them. And they belonged there. They knew they belonged there. After the show, response the same. We had more relatives of Rose Fortune there who had come from other parts of Canada to see this performance. Then after the performance was over, this very wacky, eccentric Larry David guy comes up to me and he says, I like it. I said, thank you. Who are you? He says, I'm Brad Hall. Hi, Brad. Nice to meet you. He says, I'm a sculptor. Oh, that's great. He says, I'll create the memorial. I'll do it. I'll do it. Okay, terrific. So, that being said, a couple of months go by. Next thing I get another email. Here's my sketch. Unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. It's an unbelievable piece of work. So now, we have a sculptor who's creating the Rose Fortune Memorial. Turns out, the Historical Association up there was now going on the government, asking them to make an official Rose Fortune dedication, which they did.
carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking Lord. Now the river ends between two hills. Follow the drinking Lord. There's another river on the other side. Follow the drinking Lord. Follow the drinking Lord. Follow the drinking Lord. For the old man is awaiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking Lord. Follow the drinking Lord. Follow the drinking Lord.
The princess and Amelia is going to tell us all about this summer best way.
Much like Follow the Drinking Lord, the next song you hear is a quoted spiritual with a secret message explains. Swing Low, Sweet Cherry was a favorite spiritual of Harriet Tubman, who escaped from the first slavery in 1849 and the most famous leader of the Underground Railroad. The lyrics are as follows. Swing Low, Sweet Cherry, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. The opening words, sweet low, sweet cherry, coming forward to carry me home, are a request for the Underground Railroad to come down to slave-holding states. The next line, I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Seemed like a biblical reference to the River Jordan, but actually is intended to mean the Mississippi River. The last line of the first verse, a band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home, was a hopeful message that the Underground Railroad workers would bring them north to freedom. Now the high school band will perform an instrumental version of its famous spiritual.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start, okay? So, to start our festivities, our principal, Mr. DePietro.
Can everyone hear me I don't think I know your microphone. I just want to take a moment and welcome everyone to the Unity Luncheon. And also, Mr. Barfield, who unfortunately can't be with us, a few years back, I remember him holding the first Unity Luncheon. And I'm drawing a blank on her last name, but Liz Evans. Liz Evans was there. There was a lot of people probably way before your time that were really, really active members of our school community and really, really did a great job at making sure we always recognize the different cultural backgrounds in our school. And so every year this has been going on. We've been working with the Unity Luncheon. And I just want to share just one little thing about how important it is to me, because my world before I came to Hoboken High School, I'm here 15 years, but I know it's going to be hard to believe, but I'm old, right? And I had a whole other career prior to coming here. That was at Merrill Lynch, right? And Merrill Lynch was a primarily white Irish Catholic organization, and it was largely male populated. I was the first female on my trading desk back in 1987. And I worked in that industry for 14 years, and I got tired of it and thought there needed to be something more to my life. And I began substituting at Hoboken High School after I left that career. And it was amazing to me, the diversity, right? And I had come from this completely plain vanilla world, and now I had an explosion of color and culture in my life. And if I look back at it now, I can't imagine how I could sit in a job where there's just only one type of person. I feel so blessed and fortunate to serve all of you and to work with all the families that I do, and to every year learn something new about somebody else, a different background, a different tradition, a different type of food to eat. I think this Unity Luncheon is one of the days that always reminds me of my background and how far I've come and how blessed I am to be in such a diverse community. So I'm truly thankful for it every day of my life when I come through those doors. So thank you for all of you. And this time I'd like to ask Mr. McCauley to come up and introduce
You all get your pay at the end of the week. Very good. First of all, can I just take a moment? The reason I'm doing this is because I want to look at you. All right? One of the greatest things is right here, right now. Okay? We're in the moment. All of our ancestors, at one point, have had to deal with some form of oppression. All right? Whether it was to get out of being a slave in Egypt, or having harassment and death in Culloden, or just trying to get out of Appomattox courthouse to end what was the Civil War. We've all had to deal with some form of an oppression. Our ancestors have had to deal with it. And the fact that we're here right now, having to have a great meal and breathing oxygen, means they won. So no matter what, this moment, we win. And tomorrow will be another day, we will win. Today is also for us to think about not just that unity of being survivors and winners, but also the fact that some of humanity still has to remember, yes, all human lives matter, but don't forget that black lives matter as well. And whether it be that any school, any neighborhood should not have to deal with any form of tragedy, we should have a town hall for every neighborhood that has to deal with some sort of violence, not just some that the media feels is appropriate. So let's please keep that in mind, that we will not just stand still. Lastly, there's a great expression I live by every day. I love it. It's prophetic and poetic at the same time. To judge by content of character. I know many of you know the great man that had said that. And every Martin Luther King birthday weekend, I have the pleasure of being with two men who have the utmost of remarkable, honorable character, Rabbi Clarence Mellinger and also Reverend John Armstrong. Rabbi Mellinger is my rabbi at Temple Shalom, and Reverend Armstrong is my reverend that Sunday at the New Life Baptist Church. And what we do is we have an interfaith moment. His congregation comes to our temple on Friday for Shabbat, Sabbath. And on Sunday, we go to his church for Sabbath. And we all share that moment. It's probably one of the best ways of celebrating a life that I can think of. So because of these great unity luncheons, I had asked, after the great one we had last year, there's two remarkable men I'd like to introduce to you guys. To be able to merge my spiritual family with my Red Wing family at the same time is a great honor to me. So thank you all for being here. So without further ado, let me once again introduce Rabbi Lawrence Vallinger and also Reverend John Armstrong.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you again for having us as guests in your community. We thought we would share how we got to this point and explain what we're doing now, that it was not what the original plan I don't think was. So I've been in this community for 19 years, and Reverend Armstrong's been in the community for 18 years. I inherited the congregation, meaning the rabbi before we retired, and I was told I needed to find a black church to do MLK weekend with. I'm like, excuse me? Because I thought it was weird. Because I did not want to develop a relationship with a community just because of the color of their skin. Both Reverend Armstrong and I are products of Southern upbringing. I was born in South Philadelphia. Okay, that's not that far south. But we moved away when I was 2, and I mainly grew up in Florida and Texas with a 1-year stint in Virginia. So to fast forward a little bit, John and I met at something. We started having a dialogue, and I'll let him go from there.
Okay. Thank you again for inviting us and allowing us to come in and share part of this is your Unity Day here at Hoboken High School. And as Rabbi Malachi already has said, I come from Georgia. I'm from Georgia. Okay. So you're hearing my southern accent. I'm always telling them that when I come to the temple. As times when I start speaking and I start sharing, I talk fast. So if I start talking too fast, you don't understand me. Kind of have to slow down. But coming from a southern background, when we started coming together was powerful because you see a lot of things in books. But I grew up in Georgia, and in Georgia when schools was not, school was still had. You had your white schools, your black schools, they were separate, they were segregated time. So what happened is, I grew up in that kind of environment. I was part of the school system when they actually bused the African American children over to the white school. And I recall that, so you don't get these things in books, and I share with a lot of young people, is that a lot of times we get dealing with history and overcoming a lot of biases and prejudice, begin to appreciate the cultural differences that each other have. And we all have something that we can come and we can learn from, because the person that you're connected with is actually an avenue for you to become better and greater than who you are. But they help you to broaden your horizon. Their differences is something that helps and blesses you, because it brings a lot of you to become someone you could not become without them. And Rabbi Malik, when he came and he asked, what about us coming together and do a unity service on Martin Luther King celebration weekend? I said, okay. I said, how are we going to do this? And we came together, and we said, and we talked, and we mutually agreed. We're going to respect each other's beliefs, what they believe. We're going to change how we do our service. That's when we come together. The amazing thing is that our choirs come together, right? Now understand, Rabbi Manager, you know what I mean? They come from Jewish background, have Hebrew singing and whatnot. So our choir come together.
Now we're in the Green עכשיו, כן? לא? סליחה. עכשיו אנחנו מדברים בעברית, כי ביחד ביחד. Oh, okay, I'll speak English.
So we go there and say, I know, because a lot of people in my congregation are kind of a little reluctant to go, because they didn't know what to expect. So Rabbi and I, we had talked about just going to be ourselves. Okay, we're not going to try to change each other, what you do and how you do what you do. We come to that service, our choirs come together, our musicians and they all come together and they learn to play the songs that we're going to sing in our churches, all right, in the synagogue, in the churches. And they actually come together. We have a great time over that weekend, and what is happening is the people has been blessed by, because of the coming together and getting to actually get to know one another and understanding the cultural differences that are there. They're just coming together as different. Like you said, not being around all of your same people all the time. And it brought their horizon, and they look forward to it every year. We even actually come together and do like Bible studies together and sit and talk. And believe it or not, we just finished up the Martin Luther King celebration in January here. And the people we finished up, they were saying, we need to do this more often. They said, I said, how often do you think we need to do this? They said, at least once a month. I said, do you think you can do this once a month? They said, oh yeah, we'd love it, but that's a little much. We'll just do it once a month. And Rabbi, he's just naturally funny. if anyone that's been around him for any little blink of time, he's just naturally funny. And that's what happened with him is when he come over to our church, he actually just a naturally funny, but he brings a great message across. Dealing with unity on the weekend, Martin Luther King celebration weekend. Martin Luther King, honestly, he was for all people, not just African American people, all people. Because all men are created equally in the eyes of God. We all have been created by Him. And what happens is learning to appreciate each other's unique differences, okay?
So with that, I mean, and the funny part, I do appreciate that because, so part of the Southern upbringing, we moved to Central Florida in 1967. And I started going to school early for a couple of different reasons, but I do remember in Lake Sevilia, a suburb of Florida, of Orlando, seeing white only and color only water fountains. Keep in mind, the Civil Rights Law didn't happen until 1968. And my mother said, "Oh, you're crazy." And I found a picture of that school, dated in January 1968. And so it left some impression on me. I was not aware of it at the time. And then I grew up in San Antonio where I graduated high school. So I was always in a racially and ethnically diverse community for my entire life. The synagogue was not that community. It is now. I would say approximately 10% of my congregation are members, are people of color. Because that has not historically been the experience, but we are becoming much more diverse, which is a good thing. Reverend Armstrong and I both agree on that founding principle of both of our faiths, that we are created in the divine image. And regardless of how you look at the sacred text, whether you want to take it literally, figuratively, or whatever, when the text says, and God spoke and said, "Let us," there's some challenge with that phrase because if there's no one else there to whom is God speaking, a whole bunch of issues there. But anyway, let us make human in our image. And I'm purposely saying human. I don't say man and I don't say Adam. Because Adam or Adam comes from the Hebrew word Adamah, earth. So ladies, when you say men are dirt, you're absolutely correct. But it's earth. And God said, let us create Adam, earthling, and God created them, male and female. So chapter 1 of Genesis, we're equal partners. For chapter 2, that earthling is alone. The earthling put asleep, take a rib out. Chava, life, or Eve. In chapter 2, we're no longer equal partners. My goal is to get back to chapter 1, where we're all created as equal creatures of the divine presence. I don't care what the color of your skin is. I don't care what the color of your eyes are. I do care about your character. And that's what Dr. King did teach. If you have not had the opportunity, I invite you to go to Washington, D.C. to the Mlk Memorial. It's awesome. Aside from the fact that it's the Georgia Stone from where he was from and where he is buried in Atlanta. But then the walls are all the various quotes that is attributed to him. The other quote that one of the reasons I think this continues to go strong, we are no longer looking at each other as the other. We're looking at each other as equals. We have relationships now. Some of his members have been involved in my congregation in other ways, and some of my members have been involved in his congregation in other ways. We talk on a regular basis. We live in the same community, so we care about our children and the issues that are going on in the schools and all the other challenges that we all are facing nationally. We're dealing with the issues of socioeconomic injustice because that's important to us as citizens and as men of faith. And so that's why this works for us. You are the next generation. You're the leader. And, regardless of the horrific tragedy that happened in Florida last week, who's making the most noise? Your generation. I just have one thing to say. Thank you. You want to ask us any questions? We're pretty easygoing.
Yes.
Really? I've never known teenagers be quiet. Come on. Anything you want? Yeah, go for it.
How do you run your service in the church?
How do I run it or how does he run it?
Both of you guys.
When we come together or when we come together?
So when it's in my congregation, I run the service, but he gives the sermon and the choir does the music on both sides and vice versa. When I'm at the church, he runs the service and I give the sermon. His congregation like me more because I give shorter sermons. Except, they missed you this year. Yeah, they did miss you. So we had another pastor with us this year, so yeah. We're going back to the roots.
Yes, when we come together, that's the blessing of it, because we don't change our order of service. We don't change because we are worshiping together. We learn to embrace the worship in the other order than what we normally worship at. See, if you want to get worship on the order that you worship, it's really not a worship yet, because you're worshiping a style. You worship maybe a format, but when you get where you just worship in spirit and truth, you worship the God who has created you. And it's not by the music that you play in our African American church, like when they come over, we'll live there.
Oh, come on, my people have. Okay, look, I'm gonna tell you a dirty, dark secret. Okay, white Jewish people have no rhythm. Jason. It's like
Jason Charles.
Why is it that the
Jason Charles.
But it's good because what happens is everybody now gets to be. When we do things, everybody gets involved and get involved. It is really great. And we go to the temple, we have a great time as well, of worshiping with them the way we worship. And because of that, you break down barriers and walls. And that we have just in our own preconceived ideas of what someone else is like. He breaks that down when you actually interact with one another. And that's why when he asked how we do our service, we don't change anything. That was our coming together. I said, if I cannot continue to preach and teach Jesus Christ and Him crucified, then we can't do this. If I got to change when I believe, when I say, no, I don't want you to change anything that you do. And I said, I'm not coming to temple to go to preach back to your people. Keep telling everybody going to go to hell. That's not why we're here. And we come together, believe it or not, we dialogue, and we believe things different. But we can talk about it.
But that's it. We're talking and we're being respectful, which I think is a role model that we want to emphasize even more.
And we had like a teaching, right? I was teaching on the Old Testament feasts and things of that nature. So we did like a teaching together. And I would teach like part of it, and he would teach part of it. And it was blessed because the people both our congregation come together, and they would be blessed by it. So it's when you come together and respect each other, what they believe, and don't try to change them, but then understand why do you believe what you believe, and why you do what you do, and learn from each other. Amen. Get your hand up.
I had a question. When you first decided to form this relationship, did you have resistance at all at the synagogue or at the church? Was everyone on board? Right, like that. And how did you deal with that?
It wasn't. I want to be clear. It wasn't like a 1960s, 1970s resistance.
Okay.
It was more, how well do you know him? What's he going to say?
Right.
And as Doug can attest, my response would be, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, Mr. McCauley. Sorry about that. Because again, as the Reverend said, we respect each other. So for example, we did have a guest speaker this year for another reason, and he said Jesus a lot during his sermon. And I listened to it and said, okay. So my congregants went, oh, that's jarring to the ear. I'm like, get over yourself. Because that doesn't mean anything to you. I actually made a faux pas on Sunday morning. In some of my humor, I said the full name. There's no such thing, by the way, of Jesus Christ. The problem is Jews violate the commandment of taking God's name in vain when we say Jesus Christ, even though it doesn't mean anything to us. But to a Christian believer, it's disrespectful, and I'll be more conscious of that in the future. But that's what I'm saying. I didn't, and I'm pretty sure he didn't either. It's more, you know what, we've enjoyed each other's company to the point now, if there was any, we don't know about it anymore.
That's good. That's good. That usually is what
And it is a service that we both get reasonable attendance at. It's one people want to be at.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? You guys did not pop with this one. Yes, sir.
My church is in Clipwood Beach. Clipwood Beach. Down near Keyport, below Sarahville, Edison.
Here in New York and Staten Island. it like this. We're right there. Alder Parkway, exit 118 local in Aberdeen. That's where I am. Technically, you can keep close to Cliffwood, which is a suburb of Aberdeen. The truth is, it is the forgotten child of Aberdeen. It's on the other side of the highway and the tracks for that purpose. But it is. I mean, and at one time, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was a beach town. It went down and slowly coming back. But it is a very diverse community, but it's much more a community of color than it is on my side of town.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
And most of the time, when someone asks this, like you just asked, right, where your church is at, and when I tell them, they said, where, they never heard of it, Cliffwood Beach. And even when I try to get them areas around it, like Mattawan, then they say, okay, I know where Mattawan is, but they never, you've heard of Cheesecake Park? Cheesecake Park.
Right around there.
Right around there. You come with exit 120 to the going, go to Cheesecake Park, you make the left and come right across 35. We're over near the beach, yeah.
Atlantic Ocean, right next to it.
Yeah.
All right. I know we're out of time. We're very respectful of that. Okay. Any last questions? And I just want to say thank you for having us, but more importantly, please have conversations. If there's someone you don't know, don't assume.
Right.
Ask questions. Learn about the other. Because you're going to be leading out in this world. You cannot continue to judge people based on what your perceived notions are. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to say a couple of things about this Unity Luncheon. This Unity Luncheon was started, like Mr. Pick said, by Mr. Barfield some years ago. And he chose Black History Month to do it because the whole purpose of this luncheon is not to discuss our differences, but to celebrate our similarities. All right, we are more similar than we are different, and we're one family, we're a Red Wing family, and during Black History Month, I had a conversation with Mr. Barfield, and I said, I always found Black History Month a little paradoxical, because Black history is American history. I want everybody to understand that. Every day is Black History Month, okay? Every day we celebrate all of our history and all of our culture, and that's the point of this Unity Luncheon, okay? So, I'd like to give a round of applause. You know he's not here. We had a death in the family, Mr. Barfield. Let's give a round of applause. Celebrate our Red Wing family, our African American students, our African American alumni, our faculty, our family. That's what this is about. And so thank you very much for all of you for being here. Now we are going to be treated by a culinary delight by Chef Nelson.
Lunchtime's over. No, just kidding. You be silly. But I'm just going to explain a little bit about what we're going to play. So if you guys went to the last celebration we had a couple weeks ago, we did a spiritual called Swing Low, Sweet Cherry. We're going to be doing another one. This one is called Down to Jericho. It's based on a spiritual called Joshua Fit the Battle of Jericho, which tells the biblical story of Joshua and the Israelites battling the Canaanites, and the way they defeated them was by blowing a bunch of trumpets and knocking the walls down of their fortified city. So we're kind of mimicking that in our sounds and our story, but much like the other spirituals, there's a hidden meaning behind it. This story is kind of an allegory. Does anyone know what an allegory is? Yes, what is it? You said something, yeah, I know you know. Okay, she's shy. So an allegory is a kind of representation of something. It can be any kind of art, a picture, a song, or a poem, and it kind of reflects society or politics or something. So this is a reflection of slavery, and when slaves sang this song, they were wishing for their escape and that the walls of slavery would come tumbling down. This particular selection is in the style of swing, which you might be familiar with from our own Frank Sinatra, and later Michael Bublé is a modern artist who uses that style as well. This may make you want to snap your fingers, and I'm not going to stop you. 1, 2, 3, and... Guys, switching. So we have one more for you. This is a little more modern piece. Has anyone ever heard of the artist Michael Jackson? Can anyone tell me anything about him? Andrew. Heard of him though. Okay, so he was left. Good. He was a very innovative artist. He started with the Jackson 5, okay, and then he went solo. One of his first solo albums, when he finally got creative control, because when he was a child, he was being controlled by a bunch of producers. But he switched to his own solo act, joined Epic Records, came out with the album Off the Wall, which had a lot of classics on it, but this is the first one that made him really big as a solo artist. So Don't Stop Till You Get Enough.
program rolling, I'm going to call up one of my favorite teachers in this building to introduce our next speaker. I'm going to call Miss Miller. She is going to introduce our next performer for you, and I've seen it before, and it's amazing, and I think you guys are going to be blown away. So let's give it up for Miss Miller.
Alright, so one of my favorite students, Mr. Mcnair, where are you at? Reading for us a portion of the Martin Luther King speech, I Have a Dream, which I think is one of the most inspirational speeches that's ever been written, that I've ever read. As a result of rereading it these past couple weeks, coming up on Martin Luther King Day and then thinking about this event, I think it was written such a long time ago, but what he wrote about is still super relevant to struggles and things that we're still going on with today. So, without further ado, here's Demi.
Hi everyone. So I will be reading MLK's I Have a Dream speech. And this was the speech that was given at the March on Washington. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree is a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still badly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as our citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Injustice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valleys of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. We must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their adulthood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating, "For whites only." No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out of the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from every city and from every state. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last.
Let's give her one more round of applause. I would like to call up Ms. Woods and members of the Hoboken High School Select Choir.
Andrew.
We Shall Overcome, which was the basically the theme song for the Civil Rights Movement. We moved it around because of Demira's stunning portrayal of that speech. So we're now going to move to a Zulu hymn called Siyahamba, which is a praise song meaning we are marching in the light of God. And Angel Candace is going to accompany the choir on this.
Siyahamba kokonek kwengos, siyahamba kokonek kwengos, siyahamba kokonek kwengos, siyahamba kokonek kwengos, siyahamba, siyahamba kokonek kwengos, siyahamba, siyahamba kokonek kwengos. We are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, 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 marching. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching, 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 marching. We are marching in the light of God. See a that very unfamous musician Michael Jackson. I don't know if you know about him. This is The Way You Make Me Feel. Oh, The Way You Make Me Feel. Oh, you're not Thank you.
Harper Jones for joining us.
Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to our lunchbox series for African American History Month. Today we're pleased and proud to present to you Mr. Bob Foster, who will also introduce our guest here. I'm really excited about this. Mr. Bob Foster is the director, is it?
Correct.
Of the Hoboken Historical Society. And you might be wondering, what is this I'm wearing? This is what we call a dashiki. It's a part of African culture. This one particularly comes from the country of Ghana in Africa. So today, this goes and symbolizes what's going to be discussed, and that's learning your roots and your identity. And they're going to be sharing some really interesting facts with you. So without further ado, I'd like for you all to give a warm welcome to Mr. Bob Foster and his guests.
Hey guys, a lot of people in this room. Wanted to thank Mr. Mcnair for inviting us. We got a phone call a few weeks ago, and my first reaction is like, well, I'm probably not the best person to present African American history, obviously, but we wanted to help out. So I reached out to the two best people I know who can talk on the subject, and that's Dorothy over here, and her sister Laura, and they're going to come on and sort of conduct the program. We decided we were going to keep this informal, so if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to do it. I come from an interesting background on this that generally I don't sort of go along with this idea there's 1 month devoted for a particular group, but of course it is a good way to publicize it. So I'd like to think every day is Women's Month, every day is African American Month, but again, we really appreciate this opportunity. I'm just kind of curious, how many people have been to visit the Hoboken Historical Museum? Okay, we want more of you, but thank you for coming. We're at 1301 Hudson Street, which is just a few blocks from here. We're in between Rite Aid and Sparrow's Liquor and Starbucks up there, so you can find us. And we're open 6 days a week, and we always say that kids are free, and technically you are kids. So anyone up to 18 years old can come into the museum. You just say, hey, I'm a student at Hoboken High. We do get a lot of student school visits, but usually we don't see your grades. So sort of an invitation to the teachers to come visit you, to come visit us. Right now we have an exhibit that's about World War I, and it's the 100th anniversary of that event, and Hoboken played an interesting role in World War I, and I'll leave this with the teachers. The booklet you have in front of you may not pique your interest, but it may. It's a gift. In 2005, which is a long time ago in your lives, 2005 was the 150th anniversary of the incorporation of Hoboken, and this booklet was created by then the Hoboken Reporter and the city of Hoboken, and the museum lent out photos and so on. So we say history, has no history since 2005, but the history that's documented in here is pretty solid. Segueing back to Black History Month, generally a lot of Black history does get overlooked. It's a fact. I just want to put it out there. Why? Could be lots of discussions. This journal itself, if you were going to question aspects of it, you would say there's only mentioning of 2 African Americans that played a part in Hoboken's history. And obviously that's a problem. So just wanted to put this in context. But it is a pretty good job of just sort of opening up a window to Hoboken's history. So, to the main event. Let's give the warmest welcome to Dorothy and Laura, and they are going to be talking about their family history, which they can document going back several hundred years, and hopefully it'll also pique your interest about researching your family, whether this is your background or not. We all came from somewhere, and that's an interesting journey. Dorothy and Laura, thank you very much.
Please report to the main office. Caitlin Perez and Jacob Avalor, please report to the main office.
When Mr. Foster called me to ask me to come and speak to you, I was very, very excited. Because the last time I addressed Black history in Hoboken was again in 2005 with the museum's chapbook series. This is mine, you can look at it after. And talking about that journal, this 150th anniversary of Hoboken, is really disappointing to me because I was actually on this committee. And I still was unable to get more than 2 pictures in the book, and no history whatsoever, just 2 little excerpts. And it made me think about what was going on in Hoboken. What contribution did we make in Hoboken there's no mention of the work that my family has done. I shared with your teacher earlier that my first experience with Black History Month was upstairs in the library and during Black History. And my history teacher brought me to an event such as this, only ours took place in the library. And the interesting thing for me was that was the first time I'd ever seen a Black book. I was 18 years old. And all over that library were books that Black people actually wrote. Didn't know they existed. First book I read by a Black person was Eldridge Cleaver's Soul on Ice. And changed my life because it made me know that I had a lot to learn that classrooms was not teaching me. And I would encourage you to pick up books whenever you can, read whatever you can about your own history. It doesn't have to be Black history. It needs to be your own. You need to research your own self so you can tell your own stories and no one can tell them for you. That's very important. Another thing that I would like to share with you is the history of my family. When I met Mr. Foster, I was doing a African American Firsts in Hoboken. And we was doing it at my church. And it was in response to that 150th anniversary book, because we were totally eliminated. So I had a display of all the firsts in Hoboken, including my sister, who was the first Black woman to pass the civil service test and work in the Hoboken Police Department. She's been there 25 and a half years. 25 and a half years. She retires in July. We also talked about, we had the first Black fireman. None of these things were in that book. First Black Robert Cheeks. First Black police officer. First Black postman. That was Eugene Drayton. I know all y'all heard Gene's name because he's all over town. So many firsts, probably maybe not, but so many firsts that were eliminated. And then, as an educator, I couldn't understand why my mother's story wasn't told. It was never told. My mother was on the board of directors, founding board of directors of Hope's Head Start. I'm sure you heard of Hope's Head Start. You're younger. Yeah. She's a founding member of that, and Daycare 100. She's founding member on the founding board of directors of Daycare 100. None of these things are told. We were talking before about model cities, which was the forerunner to gentrification in Hoboken. Unfortunately, they were on all of those boards. So all of these things happened, but nobody talked about it. So out of my chapbook came a thing where they wanted to do my sister's story. I did mine. Mine was different because mine included a nightclub, and they wanted more. So, but my sister had a whole different story. She wanted to talk about the history of my family. And in that process, and you are very good, in that process, my we found my grandfather. And I want to read you something. The only thing that I'm going to read you, and it's only going to take a couple of minutes, and at the same time I can share you information that we gathered from them. But this is something that my daughter wrote in 2005, days after we received the information about my grandfather. And I hope you enjoy this. And I can't read with these glasses on. And her name is Charlie Mcnair. My presentation was originally about my family history. I spent a lot of time talking to my mom and my Aunt Laura about different people in my family tree, but something amazing happened over this past weekend that made me want to change my whole project. I met my great-great-great-great-grandfather, and I would like for you to meet him too. She was in the 6th grade. But first I'll tell you a little bit about him. His name is Lawson Daniel, a.k.a. Lawson Long. He was born a slave in 1845. In 1863, at the age of 18, during the Civil War, he and his brothers ran away from their master and was mustered. That means they just pushed him in the army, in the Union Army. After the war, Papa Lawson fought the government for years to get his disability pension from the Army. It became that fight that it's because of that fight that we got to meet him today. The following is an excerpt from his deposition, and it contains the earliest knowledge my family has of our history. You can't imagine what it was like to read these words. I was born a slave of Mr. Berman, so I've always been told. I never saw him, as I remember. I've always heard that Mr. Berman got broke and that we were sold to Mr. Ben Gibson, and I belonged to him from the time I can remember until I was free. My mother was Fanny, and she also belonged to Mr. Ben Gibson. She did the year the war started. My father was named Lawson Daniel. He belonged to Miss Fanny Bowen. My master, Mr. Ben Gibson, was her guardian until she married Frank Ashurst. Father belonged to her and her husband until he was free. Question: how did he get the name Daniel? Answer: his father was named Daniel, and after we were all free and went to register, we were allowed to take our father's names. For that time, they had to have the names of their masters. So when registration took place, they took the first names of their fathers, so to disassociate with the slave name. So, and I also registered under the name of Daniel after my father. Question: how did you get the name of Long? How did you come to serve under the name of Lawson Long when you were Lawson Gibson? Answer: they gave us that name when they captured us. Question: who captured you and where did they capture you? The Yankee soldiers captured us in or near Montgomery and carried us to Mobile, where they mustered us in as soldiers. There was a whole lot of us who heard of the Yankees being at Montgomery and ran away from home and went to Montgomery where they took us in and carried us to Mobile. There were the following men from our place: Albert, Allen, Washington, Edmund, Randall, Lornemus, and me. We were all Gibsons, but the enlisting officers changed all of our names to Long. Albert, Allen, Washington, and me were full brothers. My family received, and back to my daughter, my family received these documents that are in the National Archives this weekend. The papers are part of a project my mom and Aunt Laura are working on with the Hoboken Historical Museum. There are a whole lot of papers: slave records, census records, marriage licenses, and most exciting are the military records that contain the 10-page deposition in my great-grandfather's own words. This project has made me want to look more into my family's history. Just seeing the kind of information that's out there makes me want it all. Now, I appreciate more than anything else the attention, and I will appreciate it until the day I die, the attention that you paid while I was reading this. You can never imagine what it was like reading it. We don't know anybody. Usually in the black community, we can go back to a grandmother and maybe a great-grandmother or grandfather. There is never a time when we have something like this to look at. I have his X where he signed that document. He didn't write his name, but I have that in the, I have his X. And one of the reasons why I'm here is because you all have those kinds of stories. you know, this is Black History Month, and we're supposed to be talking about Black history, but in the society that we live in today, with everything being so chaotic and confused, with so much hatred and bitterness between different groups, I think that we all need to be telling our own stories. And telling our stories will change the narrative of the country, and changing the narrative of this country will change the narrative of the world. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm willing to talk to you about anything that you want to talk to me about with these records, because these records, I have sales slips, marriage licenses, death certificates. He fought the army. My grandfather fought the army because he wanted his pension. And the reason why we have these records is because he wanted his pension. And he fought 5 years for a $5 pension. But he got it. And when I think about me and my life, I'm a cold-blooded activist and different kinds of stories. But I got that from him. And I never knew, because I think that I'm like an outcast, sort of. I'm not so much like an, no, because Mommy was an activist too, but kind of radical. I'm sort of kind of radical. In my family, everybody's kind of calm, but I'm kind of radical. And I could never understand why I was so different until I read those things. So now it's perfectly clear. One other story that I can't leave here without sharing with before you can ask us any questions that you want to ask us is that our processes in Hoboken usually were led by the church. And I know as young people, I'm not questioning your faith, your religions, or anything like that, but generally speaking, I'm a Sunday school teacher. Young people really don't care. But that's one place where you will find your family's roots. And then for me, that was Mount Olive Baptist Church on Hoboken. And my story that is included in the history of this town, and should always be included in the history of this town, is how we were the first black church in Hoboken, first black Baptist church in Hoboken, and how we lived on 69 Jefferson Street in peace from 1934, around 1934, I don't have that history in my hand, I apologize for that, from around 1934 until 1968 when we moved to Washington Street, to 721 Washington Street. Now if you can imagine, because I know you can't remember, if you can imagine in the 60s, you know, in some countries, in some states, California, there was the riots in Watts, we had riots in Newark, we had riots in Detroit, we actually had riots in Hoboken. So all of this was going on. And at that time, we decided we wanted to move this little black church into the heart of Washington Street. And if you think Washington Street is really what now, you cannot imagine what it was like in 1968 when we got ready to move. We couldn't even buy the church in our own name. We had to have a lady, and I again apologize because I don't have that paper in front of me, but she was with a Catholic church in Hoboken, and she was a white lady, and she literally put up the money so that we can buy our church because they wouldn't allow us to buy it. And after we bought it and we worshiped there for several years, and I want to say probably about 10 years or so until 1980 when they started burning stuff down around here in Hoboken, when my church was actually burnt to the ground. And we had to fight and fight and fight and fight because they did everything in their power.
Brianna Cortez, please report to the main office. Brianna Cortez, please report to the main office.
But we were able to do it, and it still stands today. That's another thing that I'm very proud of. I can't go into all the things just rambling because it would really get boring. So I would really like, if anybody has any questions based on what I said, and I could always add things, so if you want to ask Laura or anybody else if you have things.
So how long have you lived in Hoboken for?
I am 64 years old. I lived in Hoboken 64 years. Born and raised. I've been in and out from different times. I come and go, but I started.
She's 64. I'm about 20 years younger.
And both graduates of Hoboken High School.
Yes.
Class of
71.
in me, 77, I actually graduated out of Mitchfield High School in Newport News, Virginia.
Okay.
I absconded. I got out. Came back though.
Yes, ma'am.
Since you guys both graduated from Hoboken High School, how can you tell us like how it's different from like back then, like to now, like your experience?
That is an excellent question. Really, really great. Do you want to share any of your experiences about Hoboken High at all, or?
Only thing I remember about Hoboken High in schools now, do y'all have economics classes, cooking, wood shop like you spoke
We
about?
don't have wood shop, we just have culinary. That's our
Okay, y'all have culinary, and we had economics and cooking.
And auto shop.
And
auto shop.
And
Yeah,
swing.
this room was the auto and the wood shop. They split it in half. Okay, to your question, I'm going to answer your question in two parts. One, just as an alumni, and then I'm going to tie it into this program. As an alumni, I was president of the sewing club. I was the bane of, I can't even remember the name, Buddha? I think Buddha might have been Buddha. Mr. Buddha might have been the principal. I was the bane of his existence because I did not have use for Hoboken High. Hoboken High, I think I was one of 4 black children in the school. And while I did not experience any direct racism in Hoboken from schools at all, I did not. It was systemic racism. It's like the people were friends, all my friends, any of them that I can remember, I have a bad memory. But any of them that I can remember, we're all extremely close. But things like the cheerleading squad, I taught the cheers, but I couldn't be on the squad. I thought until I was an adult person that was because I was so tall, and you can't tell now, but skinny. I mean, I was tweety skinny. But, so I thought that was the reason why I couldn't be a cheerleader. I didn't realize until years later that there were none, and there had not been any before me. So I did something different back then. I mean, I believe, and I tell you and every other child that I meet, stand in your power. If you have a belief that you know is something that you know is right, you can't be fighting for dumb stuff. But if you know in your heart that something is right, you got to stand for that. And to tie this back into Hoboken High in this day, my first experience, as I said, was in 1971, my history teacher brought me here. There was just the books. And I was like, okay, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm not going in like, well, you're going to fail. You might not graduate. I said, then I'm not going to graduate. And they said, but you're cutting class. And you can think about with those children in Florida, what they're going through right now. And that's what that was like. It was shut up, sit down, and go to history, and then you can go after class to read whatever book you want. You can take whatever book home that you want to take for home. Me, in my mind, said, no. Why should I have to sit in class and listen to your history and read my history on my own time? I'm in school. Everybody's supposed to be teaching. You're supposed to be teaching me history. Not just your history, all history. And the one thing that I will share with you that's different to answer your question now is when I first got here and I'm looking around and I don't see any Black history displays and I'm getting a little tired. Feeling a little something. And I said, okay, I got to go upstairs and see the library. So I go upstairs and I look in the library. There's absolutely nothing about Black history in the library. They got Valentine's on the wall. So I'm getting tighter and tighter. But I am the kind of person, and I hope all of you understand that this is the way you have to be. Before I address a class full of students, I had to make sure that my feelings were valid. I couldn't just say what I was feeling because I was me. So I spoke to your 2 teachers that were sitting here, and I said, and shared the story. And Mr. Munoz,
Caitlin Perez, please report to the main office. Caitlin Perez, please report to the main office.
Why you don't see it around the building is because I incorporated in the curriculum. The reason why, in my history books, there was nothing. Not one word that mattered about anything. When you talked about you're in a world war, when you're world history and you talked about World War II. Well, what I know about World War II, I wanted to know about the Tuskegee Airmen. Because my uncle was a mechanic with the Tuskegee Airmen. That's what I wanted to know about. but they didn't even talk about the Tuskegee Airmen at all. That wasn't part of our curriculum. So that's the difference now. Now you have, in addition to the celebrations that we must continue to have, because there's so much that you can't put in a history book, and as much as it changes, it still stays the same. But now you have an option where in your classroom you will get some information. In my classroom, I got none. Yes, ma'am.
Does being African American make you go harder? Like, did it make you want to prove a point?
Not because I was African American. I wasn't raised to be African American. I was raised to be the best that I could be, period. My mother believed that we had to be the best. Sometimes when I have a daughter, my daughter's graduating from Columbia with her master's degree in I'm about the proudest mother on the face of earth. But no matter what it is or where you are, I don't care whether you don't go to school or not go to school. Different things are planned. Our lives take different courses. Life intervenes. We do some things, sometimes we can't do something we want to do. But as long as you do the best you can do, being black don't matter. There's struggles against us, there's systemic racism, and the outside is going to make it hard for you. But if you be the best that you can be, it don't matter what color you are. You're going to beat this kid.